Morning, everyone. We'll get started now, and then as people join, I will add. Oh. Welcome to the Franco-British latest webinar offering, Insights for Attracting, Recruiting, and Hiring Employees as a Foreign Company in France, in association with ORCOM and Actifos. We're very grateful and very happy to be joined by two members from ORCOM. We have Elisabeth Marie and Charlotte de Guigné, as well as Jerry Daumer from Actifos. If I could just ask everyone to make sure that their microphones are on mute, that would be very much appreciated. And feel free to put any questions you have in the chat, and there'll be some time at the end, hopefully, for our experts to answer them. I will now hand over to Elisabeth to get started.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today and attending this webinar. We're going to talk about recruitment and hiring employees as a foreign company in France. Speakers, myself, Elisabeth Marie, partner and chartered accountant. I will introduce ORCOM accounting and auditing firm. Jerry Delmar, managing director at Actifos Recruitment Consulting. Charlotte de Guigné, manager labor law at ORCOM International. The agenda of the webinar of the day. Elisabeth, myself, I will introduce ORCOM firm and its activities. Jerry Delmar will emphasize on insights for attracting, recruiting, and hiring employees as a foreign company in France. Charlotte de Guigné will talk about key legal points. Now, let's have a quick overview about ORCOM accounting and auditing firm. In 1979, Michel Martin created ORCOM in Orléans. Michel Martin is still in activity to date. In 1995, creation of consulting products. In 2001, integration of the firm into the AFAQ quality system. In 2005, ORCOM becomes a member of the Eurus Alliance. In 2015, ORCOM set up skill centers of activities. 2014-2015, Actifos Human Resources and Stratorial Local Finance joined ORCOM. 2017-2018, international expansion. ORCOM sets up in the US and China. Meanwhile, in France, S3P Financial Advisory and Outsourcing joins ORCOM. 2021, Civils firm joined ORCOM in UK. The firm is located near Marble Arch in London. Quercy Gestion firm in the Lot region joins ORCOM. 2021-2022, ORCOM creates Orvar Law Firm, and today, 2023, a private equity fund, financier fonds privé, joins ORCOM. Let's have a quick overview about the figures now. 1,400 employees in France all over the world, 80 partners, 50 sites in France, 10 abroad, 24,000 customers, 140 million euros in revenue. Just a quick word about the foundation. ORCOM created its own foundation. The objective of the foundation is to support initiatives led by young people or for young people. In 2020, ORCOM opened its apprentice training center, strengthening its commitment to young people. Now, let's focus on the location of our national offices. As you can see, ORCOM is mainly located in the northwest of France, Centre-Val de Loire, Paris and region, Brittany, Occitanie, and Grand Est. Actifos is located in the Centre-Val de Loire and Paris as well. Now, let's talk about our international locations. In the US, 60 consultants. We are based in New York, Miami, Boston, Los Angeles, and San Francisco. England, 30 consultants. We are based in London near Marble Arch. China, 70 consultants. We are based in Hong Kong, Shanghai, Beijing, Guangzhou, and Singapore.
As you can see, and all the countries have experienced in 2020 with the COVID period, and then a large recovery. For France, it's August 2022, with a real steep raise of job posting and of course recruitment. A steep raise also of vacancies, which have been attaining record high numbers in 2022. And on the last month and during this year, 2023, we can experience downturn, which in fact is a slowing of the activity. But in fact, if you look at the 2099 baseline, which is the dot point line, you'll see that in fact, since 2099 to today, we still are at the same level, in fact. So there is no much differences. There is a slight trend downward, but in fact, we are not completely downward. We are on a slowing of activity, going after the peak of 2022, but returning to normal. So it's still a very active and healthy market in France. Just to say that summer period and the Christmas time period, end of the year, are a very particular time where you've got lots of candidates going in the market, being open to hire at those periods. And of course, you must, if you are launching a recruitment process, take into account this seasonality in France, because it's the time where you will find very experienced and white collars open to hire. As I said, mostly employees which are very unsatisfied of their end of the year negotiation or evaluation with their current employers. So that was the point on seasonality in France. Then I wanted to show you what were the most in-demand jobs in France, because of course it's important for you to know what roles and skills are driving the French market today. On this slide, it's particularly interesting because you see the main in-demand jobs in France in 2023 in numbers and in percentage of growth. So I let you have a look at this slide, but of course you see that sales professionals are still very actively searched for in France. You see that information and technology experts are as well very searched for. So this gives you an insight of what kind of difficulty you can encounter on those kind of positions, because of course the more demand there is, the more talent competition between companies there is. And you will see in the next slide that of course there is an impact on the wages proposed, offered for those jobs. A little bit the same, but this on the view angle, which is on the job offer per function. Again, you see that above let's say 4% to 17%, you still discover the same function, which are engineering, operations, sales, information technology, human resources, business development, can be related to sales as well. And you may be surprised to see that legal, education, healthcare services, for example, which is function which is very looked for in France, but not as much as engineering, for example. So it can be interesting to have this slide. This data range from February 2022 to January 2023. So it's of last year, but it gives you a good insight, I think, on what are the main difficulties today for companies, and especially foreign companies, to recruit. And of course, what I will talk to you about very shortly is how to convince candidates in those kind of sectors to join your company in 2024, for example. So let me give you some basic tips, sorry, to approach this high demand for white collars workers and managers in France. As we said, I've shown you, you have seen that France was a very active employment market, very healthy, lots of vacancies opened since the last months, lots of candidates going back to studying the possibility of moving from their company to another. There was a big stop during the COVID period and after, but then just as we got out of the COVID period, we've got a huge amount, historical huge amount of candidates on the market, and of course, combined with a huge demand in vacancies. So you must have this data in mind when you are recruiting. Strong salaries. Why did I choose to talk to you about strong salaries? Because if you want to make the difference in France, you must absolutely work deeply in your salary package proposition to your candidates. For example, you must know that in France, to show the salary is not in your job offer is not mandatory on job descriptions in France. But if you want to catch and attract the candidates, I advise you really to put in the salary in complete transparency, because this can be can have a real effect, a real promoter, very efficient, because at the end of the day in France, the first things most French candidates, white collars, want to know is how much they are going to be paid. Are they going to have any catering, restaurant tickets? Are there any recovery days? And is remote work proposed on this position? So, like a recipe, those the subject of salaries and the package is you must have all the, like in a recipe. Sorry, you must have all the ingredients which make it a good meal and attractive meal for the open for hire candidates. The other things very important to put actively in practice is really engage in a recruitment process, because in France historically we have very high standard of in the recruitment process. We don't hire on just one video or video interview. It's generally a long process, and if you don't try to adapt to all the steps, you may be considered by the candidates. It can be surprising, but you may be considered by the candidates as a not very serious or professional company. So having a quite extensive recruitment process will help you to have a good employer image, and also will help you to be able to select the best talent, and of course to retain them. So here you've got some tips. Having a strong employer brand, offer a competitive salary, I just talked about it. Be flexible in the work arrangements. This is very important because France is the third European country in the ranking which has just been published, promoting remote work. So so you must think about work arrangements and work offering during your recruitment. You must be responsive to candidates' inquiries. I just talked about the quite dense recruitment process, but candidates are very used to it. Of course, you must think about retaining your candidates, and in order to retain your candidates and your newly employed your new employee, you must help him to project himself in the future in your organization. And this you will do it by storytelling, which will propose to your new employee a long-term vision. It's very important because very often this storytelling and this projection in the future is by many recruiters. And you've got, of course, in France, but Charlotte will come back to this point, trial period. And those trial periods are very sensitive periods. And really, what I can advise you is to have a good storytelling and a good vision proposed to your candidates in order that they don't brainstorm lonely in their position during this trial period, because you can have lots of turnover because of that. Of course, as well for retaining, proposing on the several next months or years training packages, having a kind of calendar organized for the future employee is very important, because people want to progress in their expertise. And of course, think about your company's commitment to diversity and inclusion, because this subject in France, which is a very diverse cultural society, is very important. Just to show you all the steps of a recruitment process, this is quite extensive. So you've got the totally steps you must, in the ideal situation, be able to follow. But what I want to show you there is the right hand orange part, which is focused on retaining your candidates. And that goes through, I just said about training, but reskilling, going through interesting yourself to the personal candidate experience, giving your new employee the sentiment to belong to a company community. Those points are very important, because of course the main objective is to recruit, but also of course to retain the employee which has been recruited. This is a real challenge in France today, as we've got Generation Z, which is very unstable. We've got a lot of turnover with this generation, and what they are waiting for is mainly all those points in this orange corner on this slide there. When you are looking as a foreign company to publish your job offer, you can use hiring platforms, and you've got several hiring platforms that, just to give you an idea, of course, all platforms are not on this slide, just chosen what we use as Actiforce as tools for our recruitment mission. So you've got, if you go on permanent job, you've got the hiring platform LinkedIn, for example. That's what we use at Actiforce. We have all the licenses in LinkedIn. Very, very effective. They just put some artificial intelligence in their tools, so it's very helpful. So that was for permanent job. You've got temporary staffing with Indeed Flex and other temporary platforms, and you've got as well, which is quite used in France, talent platform, which allow you to access freelancers. So the freelance status is on the complete growth since 3 years right now. A lot of people after the COVID decided to become freelance, and you've got large amounts of experts available via those talent platforms. Again, on this slide, just quickly to remind you that in France, it's always the difficult part. It's the time of negotiation with the money. So money is the elephant in the room in France. In fact, it is due to a significant salary disparity in France between, you have a large gap between employees and white-collar salaries, a very large gap. And you must be aware and try to get access to data benchmark when you are engaging in a recruitment in order to be at the best level of negotiation with your candidate. This is what I told you, it be surprising, but remote work is France is one of the leading countries in Europe proposing remote work. So we are just after Spain and Luxembourg. So it's nearly 90% of jobs which today offer remote work. So of course, we advise you to offer remote work in your job description. Data sources, the slide we will address to you, you will find all the data source we used building this webinar, and it will be very useful for you. You've got benchmark of wages, for example, white collars. Of course, in France, we have, like in other countries, we have very high-level study organization, many public sector one. You've got APEC for white collars and Pôle emploi for employees, and they are very extensive and detailed data you can use, and it's free to use. So go ahead. I will now pass it on to Charlotte, which will speak to you about the next step after you have selected your good candidates. Then you must offer him a working contract.
Yeah, well, thank you very much, Jerry. Well, just a little background before starting this presentation. To succeed in your hiring in France, it's important for you to anticipate different topics and to keep in mind some steps. So first of all, you have to assess your recruitment need. Then you need to decide where and how to hire your employee and think of the company's legal setup. This is very important. Then you need to be informed on French labor rules and anticipate administrative formalities, and you'll see after that there are quite some in France. After that, you can start your recruitment process, then select your employee, decide and agree on the terms and conditions of the relationship, and finally hire the employee and start the contract. So first of all, as a foreign entity, it's really crucial, and I insist on that you determine the entity that will be hiring the employee, where to put the employee. Here for foreign entities, we mostly see those three situations, either creating a representative office. So representative office is mainly used to evaluate markets before going for full commercial activity. It's also used to conduct marketing and other non-transactional operations. It's not used for actual business, but it needs to be registered with local government. Secondly, you can also consider creating a branch. A branch is an extension of an existing company, and it is dependent from the parent company. The third possibility is to create a subsidiary, which will be an independent and autonomous legal entity. So choosing one of those schemes depends on your needs, and it will have consequences from a legal and tax point of view. So we really advise you to ask prior deciding what you're going to do, to ask your counsel or your accountant about what would be the best option for you. Anyway, in any case, the entity will be registered in France with the French administration. It will be given a SIRET and a NAF code referring to its activity. And this NAF code will help determining the applicable collective bargaining agreement. We'll see that after. So I just told you that the administrative process in France when you are creating and hiring an employee is quite not necessarily complex, but quite dense. An important question for you to ask is prior to hiring, if your employee is of non-European nationality, this is important, you must check if he's allowed to work in France. Actually, the employee should have the right work permit that corresponds to his situation. And you also have to be aware that different procedure can apply depending on the type of work permit. And before actually hire the employee, this step should be anticipated at the stage of recruitment, as I insist on that, obtaining or renewing the work permit can take time. Also, I would like to emphasize that penalties can be incurred in the case of hiring an employee without the right authorization. Also, you can see that there is an obligation to subscribe to what we call the occupational medicine. The company has to be affiliated to what we call the Occupational Health and Prevention Service. And you also need to get an appointment for your new employee to the information and prevention visit. And this is a visit that has to be performed within the 3 first months of hiring. Then, employees hired to work in France should have the social security number, as they should contribute and benefit from the French general social security system. If the employee has no social security number, it can happen. As an employer, you have the obligation to do the pre-employment registration, which is what we call the DPAE, and you also have to inform your employee of the fact that he should get in touch with his Centre de Sécurité Sociale to try to get his number. The DPAE, so it's the pre-employment registration declaration, must be submitted in order for the employee to access to all of his entitlements. And it also has to be done in order for you to meet the requirements and thereby avoid any punitive measures, particularly those related to undeclared work. Then regarding health, life and disability insurances, French public healthcare social security determines basic fee for health treatment and reimburses part of it. But in addition, as an employer, you have to set up what we call a supplementary health insurance. This is to top up the social security basic guarantees. You also need to support, at the very least, 50% of the premium, 50% being supported by the employee. Also, life and disability scheme covers death, prolonged sick leave, and disability risks. This scheme comes in addition to the basic insurance scheme provided by the French Sécurité Sociale for those risks. On the top, and of course, you will see that every month, as an employer, you need to draw up a payslip to give it to your employee and, of course, pay your employee. In principle, salary payment is made in France on a monthly basis on the same date. You also need to comply with social security declaration deadlines and pay social security contributions, apply and collect the withholding tax on the employee's salary, and pay the corresponding amount to the French tax authorities. Now, let's have a look to the main French labor law sources. Previously, I talked to you about the CBA, the collective bargaining agreements. Now we are going to focus on the main sources. So at the top, you have what we call public order rules. Those rules are mandatory and they can't be disregarded because they meet fundamental requirements or overriding interests. So every subsequent text shall abide by the minimum requirements stated by those rules or provide for more favorable provisions. This is mandatory. Then you have the CBAs. So CBA, collective bargaining agreements, are collective agreements negotiated by unions representing employers and employees from the same national industry sector. Each CBA defines its professional and territorial scope of application, and companies falling under its scope have to apply it. It's mandatory also. CBA adapts the rules of French Labour Code, taking into account specificity of the sector of activity, for example, regarding the trial period, notice period, job classification, salaries, bonuses, leaves, termination rules, etc., etc. And CBA provisions can be more favorable than legal provisions. And it can also provide for additional obligations that are not indicated in the French Labour Code. In addition, the company can also negotiate internally what we call company agreements on specific topics for the company itself. For example, company agreements regarding work duration, regarding overtime compensation, etc., etc. You can also negotiate within the company only. And last but not least, you have the employment contract, which is also considered as a rule, and actually it will rule the individual relationship between the employer and the employee. And we'll focus on it just after. So here, when you recruit, it's very important that you have assessed in advance the mission and its duration to know what type of contract you're going to propose the employee. In France, the writing of the employment contract and applicable rules will depend on the type of contract you will sign, and this is important to understand. Here's a very short presentation of the main types of mainly used contract, I would say, in France. First, you have apprenticeship contracts, which are contracts mostly for young people, and those contracts can benefit from public financial support. Then you have temporary contracts, but I will not tell more about those contracts, and I would like more to focus on fixed term and permanent contract. Permanent contract are open-ended contract. Actually, it means that after the trial period, which is optional in France, the end of this contract is not known in advance, and the contract will end on the decision of the employer or of the employee. Then we have fixed-term contracts that can be renewed twice and concluded for a maximum period of 18 months. It can be only used in very limited situations, such as to replace an absent employee, to face what we call a temporary and exceptional increase in activity, or for season work. This is very important because in France, permanent contract is the rule. Unlike fixed-term contracts are necessarily written, and they must gather specific information. Permanent contracts are not necessarily written ones, but it's highly advised anyway to do so. In principle, contracts written and signed in France should be written in French. Otherwise, the employer will not be able to avail against the employee clauses written in another language. And this is very important for you to understand because it's a situation we very often see with our foreign clients. So this obligation to write documents in French also applies to any document that create obligations for the employee or to any document that is necessary for the performance of the employee's work, for instance, targets. Why is it so important? Well, actually, this rule has been recently reminded by case law in June and October this year. It was about a financial reward plan written in English and also documents setting targets for employees receiving flexible salary from a subsidiary of a US company. So I think it was very important to remind this rule to you today. Okay, so, well, here you have a sample of the most important rules to know and to be taken into account when considering hiring an employee. It's important to consider the terms and conditions of the contract. In France, the maximum, first I would like to tell you about work duration. Maybe you already know that, but in France, the maximum number of working hours is 35 hours per week. Actually, it's the legal work duration. This week is counted from Monday 0 to Sunday midnight. This statutory limit may be exceeded in some situations, and any hour worked over the statutory weekly limit is considered as overtime. Okay, which entitles the employee to a wage supplement or, where applicable, an equivalent compensatory rest. In principle, payment for overtime is supplemented as follows: 25% for the first 8 hours of the statutory working time and 50% for hours thereafter. Okay. However, there are also limits to the number of hours beyond which no further work may be requested. So here there are 10 hours per day, 48 hours per week, and 44 hours on average over a period of 12 consecutive weeks. Exemption can be granted by the work inspectorate. Also, after 6 hours of work, the employee must benefit from a minimum rest break of 20 consecutive minutes. Regarding salary, the employee must be paid at the very least the minimum legal wage, which is called the SMIC, or the minimum wage provided for by the CBA with regard to the employee's classification. Okay. So on the next slide, I wanted to inform you that it's very important to consider the status of the employee when you're going to determine the terms and conditions, because the type of clause, the type of work duration, the type of benefits, the length of the trial period, etc., may depend on the salary and on the employee's statutes. The question of remote work. So, referring to what Jerry said at the very beginning, if the employee is to work from France, it's important as a foreign company to consider the question of work location. Work location may involve topics such as immigration, legal contribution, tax, social security, practicalities, etc. So it's very important to anticipate it. Here, as the topic is very large, I would like only to focus on the remote work from France. Hiring an employee remotely can be a good option, not only when the company has no premises in France, but also when you have identified a candidate who is located far from the company's location. Remote work in France can be full or partial, and I would like to give you some quick key points. So first, when you are considering hiring an employee to work remotely, you should anticipate and work on your management strategy. And also you should know what are the requirements in France. For example, for an employee working remotely, full-time remotely, you have to pay what we call a suggestion allowance in order to compensate the occupation of the employee's home space for professional purposes. So given the time, I'm going to go a bit faster on this slide. And then I would like to terminate by giving you some tips to keep and attract your employees. I put you a list, but I'm just going to quote some of them. For instance, subscribe a favorable health and life insurance scheme offering higher guarantees or supporting a higher rate of contribution can be something very interesting for employees and sometimes requested by employees. You can also negotiate additional paid leave, for instance, additional rest days for length of service. It's something that companies do more and more in France. Also negotiate profit sharing schemes on a voluntary basis. I'm thinking of the intéressement scheme, but also now participation. And also you can negotiate more favorable overtime compensation by negotiating a company agreements to increase the compensation rate for overtime. For example, instead of proposing 25% compensation, you can propose 30%, etc., etc. It's something you can negotiate internally, and that can be favorable for the employee. Well, I hope, I have finished with my presentation. I hope that you enjoyed, despite our internet
Chaos.
issue, this presentation. And I really hope that all those tips were useful for you, and it helped get you some guidance to start an employment relationship in France to recruit and hire an employee. Of course, we'll be very happy to assist you if you need some help or some more information about this topic. So feel free to contact, and we hope to have the pleasure to meet you soon.
Thank you, Charlotte, and thank you, Jerry, for your presentation. I do not know if we have any time left for the questions, but feel free to contact us at our details in the next slide, or phone number and the email address. Do not hesitate and feel free to contact us anytime you want. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you everyone for watching. Thank you for your patience and for sticking with us. I will be sending out the slides from this presentation to everyone, so you can have a copy of that. And we will also, after editing, we'll be putting the recording on YouTube so you can rewatch it. Thank you everyone for coming, and we'll see you at the next one.